Have you ever considered working outside of clinical practice? Maybe you are 5 or 10 years out and you've tried several different practices and you've done the coaching and the programs, but still, you can't quite find your happy place in a traditional veterinary job. Or maybe there's a practical reason why clinical practice doesn't fit this stage of your life. Kids or partners or work commitments, whatever the reason, you might be wondering what else is out there. But, and I know this feeling, where do you even begin? All you know is how to fix sick animals, right? Wrong. In this conversation, Dr. Steph Morley will tell you that you are actually pretty fabulous at many other things and that you have skills and attributes that make you super useful outside of the vet clinic. You just don't know it yet.
So much of what I did in practice, every day, I still relate to it. And so if you can recognize that what you're doing in that exam room or in that treatment room or in that OR actually has translation into other potential things outside of your job, all of a sudden you'll start feeling like, oh, dang, I'm pretty good.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and you are listening to The Vet Vault, where we pick at the loose ends of the veterinary profession to unravel the common threads that will help you build a meaningful, fulfilling career and life with a vet degree in your hand. And in this episode, you will learn how to totally rewrite your CV to make it applicable to any industry, with a long list of translatable skills that you didn't know that you had. You'll find out why you should and how to network, and you'll hear about a strength that you probably have that will serve you in any job that also has the potential to hurt you. But this one is not just for people who want to leave practice. The topics we discuss with Dr. Steph will show you how to accurately value yourself and your knowledge, which of course helps with those money conversations in practice, and how to change that negative self-talk that devalues your skills and makes you feel like an imposter. Our guest is Dr. Stephanie Morley. Dr. Steph's career started with an undergraduate degree in hospitality and business because it suited her real goal, which was downhill skiing. But she did a complete and fairly spontaneous switch to vet science for no other reason than
one of those serendipitous conversations I was having with someone where it was like, well, if you could do anything, what would it be? And I said, I don't know, being a vet could be cool. Literally, that was it. That's what changed the trajectory of my life.
This led to a few years in clinical practice and in a practice management externship with a corporate hospital. But practical reasons, like kids and a non-compete, led to a pivot into lab animal medicine.
And once I pivoted that first time, life just kept pivoting and squiggling because I, at that point, became more open to other possibility and just kind of kept leveraging my background for things that I don't think I could have otherwise imagined.
Since then, Steph has had roles as the Associate Director of Business Development at the University of Michigan, the co-founder and president of Zomedica, an ongoing role as a business advisor and coach for startups, and then eventually to a current role as president of VetLen Advanced Veterinary Devices. And in this episode, she'll tell us a bit more about the things that she's working on in this role. Okay, I'll leave you in the capable hands of Dr. Stephanie Morley and why sitting with discomfort and seeing where it takes us can sometimes be a good thing, why the bad times might just be the prelude to the good stuff later, even if you can't see it, and much, much more. You have such a different background to the average vet story. As you said, there's so many vets who go into it because it's always been the thing they wanted to do. They have this idea, and sometimes romanticized idea, of vet life. And then the fact that you say from the beginning you were interested in entrepreneurship and business and practice ownership, whereas for most of us, that's the last thing. It's animals, animals, animals. I'm so focused on making animals better, being James Herriot or whoever. And then only much later, this has become there's this business thing attached to this thing that I do, and people, the hospitality side of it. That's such a good insight. Have you seen patterns in your career with people you've worked with or mentored, or do you see trends or patterns between those two groups of vets and vet students, the ones that have always wanted to be vets and are passionate, and then potentially, because I have a theory that potentially those people are more likely to be disillusioned when the reality of vet life hits them, versus somebody who goes, well, if I'm going to work, I read a quote that you said in one of your other interviews, well, if I have to work for a living, working with animals could be pretty cool. Sort of going into it kind of blind. Does it help?
Yeah, I do think it helps. I mean, I know plenty of people in my circles who never wanted to be anything other a veterinarian are very happy with their careers, or they're stressed by their careers because just being a professional is stressful, regardless of what profession it is. But they don't regret, becoming a veterinarian. But I do think of the people that I've talked to who are disillusioned and are burnt out and, not in love with the track that they chose. Most of those people have been, actually, I can't think of anyone who wasn't dedicated to being a veterinarian their whole lives. And, I don't really have good advice for that other than to say it's a phenomenal career. It's a phenomenal field. The veterinarians are just the most exceptional group of professionals I've ever known. And I've gotten to work with a lot of professionals, a lot of PhDs and MDs and DOs and, engineers. And there's just a characteristic in veterinarians that's so beautiful and exceptional. But I think that's also the threat a little bit, because we are so, as a species, we tend to be soft in just the right ways, which means we can get hurt. And that's a vulnerability that you don't see in a lot of other professions. And that's the vulnerability that I think ends up really causing suffering in a lot of us, is because it just didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, or we just couldn't do it perfectly. We're perfectionists, right? You have to be to get into vet school. But the life of practicing medicine is not for perfectionists. It's for people who are willing to try and fail and learn. And that is not how we are brought up. We're brought up to do perfectly. Get those A's, get those A's, get those A's, do those hours, everything you need to do to get into vet school, versus people who maybe are doing other things or don't know what they want to do. Then they're open to a lot of other things. Or they're somebody like me who I didn't grow up wanting to be an entrepreneur. I actually didn't, because multiple people in my family own small businesses and I saw how hard it was. So I was like, I want a job where I get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but I respected business as a concept. I respected that if you make something or you provide a service, people will pay you for it. That's the gist of business. And I always respected that. But I think people who go into business just have a little bit more of that tendency. I don't know exactly where this is going to take me, because it can take you anywhere. It's a really general degree. So they're kind of open to like what life could hand them, and it's not necessarily, I mean, you probably heard the saying, it's not about what you know, it's who you know, right? It's what business school teaches you. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So you have to hone networking skills and interpersonal skills in order to be successful. And that's not something that we really work to train veterinarians or people who spend their lifetime trying to get into vet school.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, because going back to what we just said about the classic veterinarian perfectionist and that little bit of magic that you mentioned, it's so interesting that you say you've worked with so many other professionals and there is this uniqueness about vets. And it's so hard for us because we're so stuck inside the bottle of veterinary science. We can't read the label from the outside. We don't know what it's like out there. And I have had the same experience over and over and over through the podcast, mostly speaking to people who work with us as veterinarians. So, accounting or property or all the other ancillary services. And if it's a business who does, let's say, insurance, and they do pet insurance, but they also have like a different insurance arm or something, and all of them always say, I'm so glad I'm in the... It's like they almost fight each other to do the vet stuff. And you ask them why, they say, because I just love working with the profession. It's so different. People treat us with respect. They're nice. They're people who care. But it's interesting. I've never thought of that. It's that we care so damn much that we get so hurt, because the world doesn't always care back as much as we care.
Yes, it's so true. And, I think that's why, I've done all these different things and it's led me down my squiggly path. But really one of the soapboxes that I got to is just recognizing like we can get taken advantage of because of our vulnerable nature. But we also have a level of expectation on us as medical professionals that's very different than our human counterparts. And the biggest difference in that is we are a cash-based business. So if I want you to take my recommendations for ultimately my patient, which is who I care about, I have to sell you on what I'm recommending. And we don't like to be salespeople, but that's absolutely what we are. And I think there's so many things out there. And then the other side of that is like to bring products to animals, it's a much lower bar. Not necessarily for approved drugs, but we have to use a lot of things off label, right? Because they don't make products for us. So you get all this stuff that's being made for us where it's really not good. There's no data behind it. We were trained, many of us were trained as clinical scientists and not bench scientists or research scientists. So even interpreting data can be pretty tricky if you weren't trained on how to do it. And so we just get all this stuff where it's like, so what it ends up doing is it turns us into really cautious people too. We don't trust new things very often. I remember going to one lecture one time, and it was a boarded anesthesiologist, and she was talking about these protocols she used for different things. It's just like, I tried 0.1 of this and 0.2 mLs of this on these 3 horses, and it worked. And everyone's writing notes down. And then she starts talking about this new drug that's on the market. And she's like, well, they only did 200 animals in the clinical trial, so the jury's still out. So everyone instantly was skeptical of this FDA-approved drug, but they would write down a protocol that she did on 3 horses, and they'd use it in a heartbeat. So as someone who's been on both sides of that equation, it's really frustrating because it's like the amount of time and money and energy it takes to do all of those clinical trials and do all these things to bring products to veterinary medicine appropriately. And then to still have veterinarians be like, I don't know. I asked Dr. Jones, who was my professor 20 years ago, and he's never heard of it, so I'm not going to use it. I get it. Like, I get why we're that way. It's because we've been sold so much bad stuff, or we just haven't had the right things made for us, you know? So I think that level of expectation for us versus our MDs friends is that we're a cash-based business. We have to get our customers to trust us so that we can do the right things for our patients. And then we have to justify our expense. And that just feels gross, you know, especially when you're writing your student loan checks every month and stuff. It's really frustrating. And our MD counterparts, they still have student loans too, but they don't have to have those conversations on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I think it just leads to a level of, it just wears you down, you know, and it's an unfortunate thing because we are a beautiful profession.
So did you still struggle with that despite your business background?
Oh, yes.
You did? Okay. So because I'm looking for solutions, because we're talking about this problem, which is, for me personally, 20-something years into clinical vet practice, still a problem for sure, that gross feeling. So you talked earlier about the benefits of doing a business degree and understanding business and stuff. And I was wondering, looking at your story, whether it would be worth for veterinarians to, at some stage, whether before or after a vet degree, do a business degree. Does it make some of that easier or not really? What?
No. I mean, because the business degree is just teaching you like the textbook stuff associated with business, you know, accounting, HR, finance, you know, boring stuff. The soft skills you learn in a business degree are just because of the environment you're in. So my recommendation, I have a lot of recommendations for people to how to get more comfortable with their value. And it's particularly an issue for women, but we question our value. We don't own what we're worth, right? So if someone questions you on it and says, you know, I can't believe you're charging me $800 for a spay, blah, 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 whatever it might be, you just got to own it. You got to just tell yourself that internal conversation that you have with yourself all day, every day. Change the script, flip the script, and tell yourself you're worth it. Remind yourself you're worth it. You bring an intellectual currency to this relationship that they can't easily replace. And if they're not willing to pay it, then someone else will. But don't undercut yourself because of that one person's. Quite honestly, most of the people I encountered in practice who were mean about it, they were probably unhappy about something else. You know, who knows what? They stubbed their toe. I don't know. But at that time in my life, it was devastating to me to have people accuse me of not caring about animals because I won't do something for free. So I don't think it's a business skill so much as a life skill. But I do think that it is something that veterinarians would benefit from if they would just recognize that and try to change that internal. I'm a big, positive self-talk person because for 46 years of my life, or I guess I haven't talked for 46 years, but for the first many decades of my life, I did not talk well to myself. And in the last few years, I've really made an effort to change that. And I think it's something that everyone could benefit from doing. And I'm also a big believer in mantras. So just stick Post-it notes all over to remind yourself of whatever it is you need reminding. And it won't stop people from having those gross conversations with you, but it'll change how you react to them.
Yeah. So how do you change that self-talk? How do you start believing in your value? Because if it's a deep-seated thing that I'm uncomfortable charging for this or this because I feel inferior. Not to say inferior, but
I'm not a therapist. Yeah, I'm not a therapist, but I've done a lot of therapy. And there's one concept that's called limiting beliefs. So identifying some belief that's limiting you from your greatest potential. So if your limiting belief is that you're not valuable or you're not worth what, you're asking for financially, whatever that might be, then you kind of keep asking yourself, it's actually really evidence-based. So people like us should really embrace it. And you ask yourself, do I have any evidence that this is true? And then you ask yourself, do I have any evidence it's not true? If I asked people who know me and love me, would they think this statement is true? What's another way to think about this? And then it's those new ways to think about it that allow you to start changing that talk track. Literally, if you Google limiting beliefs, you will find, little worksheets on how to do this. But it's a really effective exercise for people who are data driven because you're forcing yourself to ask for evidence as to whether what you think is true. And every time you will find out it's just your own stupid head talking. It's your own insecurities. It's your own ego. It's your own fears. And you can change that. But it takes a lot of work because once you realize you find some core limiting belief, then you have to just constantly remind your conscious and your subconscious that it's not true. And that's a really challenging thing to do, particularly in difficult times. But I highly suggest it because when you find those things and you start breaking free of them, it's very freeing, but it also gives you a tool to come back to so that you can come back to it if you have it again or you're having a doubtful day or whatever it might be. It's cloudy and you just feel down. You can remind yourself of that, and talk yourself out of it. So
I have to interrupt you with this question. Have you checked out our clinical podcasts? You are here listening to this, so I'm assuming that you're a vet. And if you're a vet, you should be staying up to date with your clinical knowledge, not just for the sake of your patients, but also for your own well-being, because vetting is way more fun when you actually know your shit. And you're here on this podcast, so I assume you like, or at least are able to tolerate my voice and style of interviews. So why not combine the two? On our clinical podcast, I interview specialists about their topic of expertise to ask all of the questions that I've had over my 20 plus year vet career to provide you with the practical tips, insights, pitfalls, and updates that will make you better at your job and therefore happier in your job, which is, after all, why we are all here. Full access to the clinical podcasts is through a paid subscription because I do it for a job and I don't want to pepper the feed with ads because A, you don't like listening to ads, and B, I worry that it will impact the credibility of the content and that I'll end up just talking about topics that sponsors will pay me for. Whereas in a listener support model like this one, I can talk about what's relevant and what's useful, and we can talk up or bag whatever we want without worrying about upsetting the sponsors. Go and check it out at VVN, that's VVN for Vetvault Network.supercast.com. Your first 2 weeks are free. That leads beautifully into a question that I had, but I think you may have answered it, but I'll just double check that you have fully answered it. So again, when I researched you before, I read some other interviews with you, and you told a story about during vet school on your equine rotation, it's like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning, and you're alone in a stable having to take blood from a horse. And as you said, you're not a horsey person, you're not somebody comfortable with this, and you had this thought process going, why am I here doing this? I don't have the qualifications, I don't have the skills to do this. And it's that sort of feeling that, well, there's probably some evidence at that stage in your life that you did not have the skills and the qualifications. But then I read that, and then I look at the rest of your career, and, founder of a tech business, a medical tech business, and new jobs and new opportunities. Do you still get that feeling sometimes when you go, why am I here doing this? What the, you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Every day. Every day. But I honestly, I could throw out a bunch of mantras, but that whole concept of life begins when you get outside of your comfort zone and all that stuff. It's very true that every opportunity I've had that led to something really cool was because I took on a challenge of something I've never done before. But when you do that, unless you're a super big ego person,
some sort of pathology,
probably. Unless you have just this innate self-confidence, you're gonna question yourself. I did it today. My husband and I were talking about something for this current role I have, and I expressed a little bit of self-doubt in that too, but I caught myself, right? And the difference is I caught myself and said, well, I guess I better figure that out, right? And I think that's, part of what's so impressive about veterinarians, that I'll just speak to veterinarians. I know there's other professions that would have this too, but I think it's uniquely high percentage of veterinarians that have to think outside of the box to get their patient what they need. I call us the MacGyvers of medicine because of that old TV show with he can make a bomb out of 5 ingredients kind of thing. And we've always had to be that way because nobody's making products specifically for us, or not a lot of products anyway. Or we have a Chihuahua and then we have a Great Dane, right? I mean, they're both dogs. So what are you going to do? So we've always had to kind of MacGyver our way through doing things. We have economic constraints that impact every decision that's made as to what we can do for our patients, at least on the small animal side, but definitely economics on the large animals too. And so when you have those variables thrown at you all the time, so it can't just be a checkbox, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, and then we'll get answers and then we'll figure out the next thing. But instead you're can't do these 2 things, but you can do these 3 things, but you got to do this one first, because otherwise if this one comes back negative, then I don't want to do these. There's nothing textbook about what we do. So if you can stop and you can reflect on things like that and realize, like, I do this every day. I have to think outside of the box. Every patient I see, everything I do, like, be empowered by that so that the next time some random opportunity comes up or whatever, like, sure, I'll get outside of my box for this one because who knows what could happen, because I do it every day. It might be uncomfortable, but I'm still capable because I prove that I'm capable of it every day.
I like that. Instead of that self-doubt going, yeah, this is my jam, man. This is what I do. This is my... That's a good feeling. Every now and again in life, you get that opportunity where you go, I've got this. But you're right, we do. Yeah.
And that's the flipping the script, right? It's looking at your experience with a different lens. And instead of saying, okay, I can do this and I can do this, but I can't do this, instead look at it and say, oh my God, look at everything I can do. And look how it relates to other things. It's like, it's that translational skill set comment, it's absolutely, I shouldn't say everything. It's bad to speak in absolutes, but so much of what I did in practice every day, I still relate to it. And so if you can recognize that what you're doing in that exam room or in that treatment room or in that OR actually has translation into other potential things outside of your job, all of a sudden you'll start feeling like, oh, dang, I'm pretty good. I'm more than just a DVM, I'm like this experienced, wise everything under the sun kind of person. And it's really cool. You're still going to have days of doubt and everything, but if you can find those core things where you can just remind yourself like, yeah, I got this, then, but yeah, we're an amazing profession.
I'd love to talk about those transferable skills, because where I wanted to go with this conversation a little bit as well is for the listener who wants to leave practice for whatever reason. So you had a very practical reason why you had to leave. And some others just go, well, it's just not my thing. Or I've had enough of it. I've done it 10, 15 years and it's time for a next chapter. But then that stuck feeling of, well, all I know how to do is how to treat sick animals. That's what I learned. That's my skill. I have my stamp of approval says veterinarian, and everything outside of that feels very, very foreign and very scary. And that feeling of, I don't know how to do that is very common. Like I see it on the social media chats, and lots of my colleagues and friends I've spoken to, and they go, yeah, I want to do something else, but I don't know what I can do because I don't have any other skills. For you, I love that you say you use your veterinary skills every day in your completely different ball game now. Do you have some of those skills that you can encourage us to, or people listening to this to go, oh, that's not a skill I knew I had. What sort of skills have we got? Yeah.
So if you think about like writing a resume and you're trying to tell somebody who's not a veterinarian, like how your skills apply, that's how I think of translational skills, right? So a really obvious one to me is that you are an excellent decision maker in high risk scenarios. You have a bleed out in surgery, right? You have an animal, you can't find a bleeder and it's a totally stressful situation and you have to make a decision on what you're going to do in a split second. Well, decisiveness in high stress situations are skill sets in a multitude of careers outside of vet med, outside of the OR, right? So that is a way to translate that skill set into something that a non-DVM is going to understand. Taking a history. You know how to get a history on an itchy dog who can't speak. I mean, think of all the ways you could reword that into something that someone outside of vet med is going to understand. I mean, it's root cause analysis, right? You're trying to get to the root cause of that animal's itching. Yeah. Well, how do you do that? You ask the right questions, you listen, you prioritize. These are all things that you do in every interaction. Sales, we already touched on that. You are a salesperson because the only way your patient is going to get the care it needs is if you can effectively sell your recommendations to the owner. That's customer service. That's sales. If you manage a practice, or if you're a leader in a practice, you're a lead veterinarian, you've been there a long time, you own a practice, whatever, you absolutely have human resource skills. If you've ever been responsible for, ordering products or identifying new products, you have inventory management skills. You have data analysis and purchasing decision-making capabilities. These are all words that are outside of vet med, but totally applicable. I could go on forever. I actually wrote a course for veterinarians for pivoting out of practice for that reason. It was, people ask me that all the time. How did you get out of practice? I'm stuck. I don't think there's anything. I don't want vets to leave practice. Don't get me wrong. I think practice is, I think there's a lot of problems people have in practice that could be solved and keep them in practice. A lot of mental health issues, so many, things that are going in the right direction for our profession. But I'd like to speak more on translational skills to people who are really intentionally trying to leave practice because they just want to go do something else. And that's okay. I think that's what's kind of unfortunate for a lot of our professionals who spend 10 plus years in college and 200,000 plus, dollars in debt. And then you feel like I can't possibly do anything else because I spent all this time and money to become this person. And what we end up doing is creating these little niche people that are then suffering because maybe they just want to try something else. I mean, the CEO of Pfizer is a veterinarian, of human Pfizer is a veterinarian, right? There's so many examples of people who just tried different things. I'm just one of them. But I left practice unintentionally. I left practice because I was kind of in a situation like what you were saying some listeners are. It's just, I got to get out. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm grateful that I ended up going into lab animal medicine and contract research. I learned so much about how drugs and medical devices get approved for humans and for animals. I just tremendous amount of respect for research. So, and I got to work with species I'd never thought I'd work with. So I really enjoyed that, and I appreciate that experience. But when I made my next move, I was much more intentional about it. I really asked myself, like, what do I want? And it wasn't about title or, I mean, yeah, I had to know what my budget needed to be to pay my student loans and feed my children. But it was really more about, what do I want my day to look like? And what do I want the people around me to be like? And I asked those kind of questions. And one of the biggest things that became really important for me was I wanted to work for someone I could learn from, because I had had a lot of bad boss experiences by that point. And ultimately, that's how I ended up going into business development and academia. Was the woman I worked for was just fantastic. And I just knew I could learn from her. But I knew I intentionally had figured out that was an important thing to me. So asking yourself those questions about what it is I don't like, what is it I do like? Sometimes it's hard. It's easier to identify the things you don't like. Well, then just put those on a big list, right? And also recognizing what major impacts things like, are you on your feet all day? Are you at a desk all day? Do you have a window to look out to? Do you want to be outside? Do you want to work with people? Do you want to work for yourself? Those seem like silly things to ask, but those are big parts of what lead to a successful day-to-day for somebody. You hate working with people and you're working in a big team and you can't succeed without working with people every day, you're going to be unhappy. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Asking yourself, do you want to work with animals every day? Do you want to have your hands on animals every day? That's important to know, because you can still do things outside of clinical medicine where you're doing that, but it's an important aspect to figure out. So, I guess that's some of the advice I give people when they're looking to potentially leave, and a lot of it is internal homework, is asking yourself a lot of questions.
Yeah. If not this, then what? I've said it before on the podcast. I still have an old diary somewhere, because I still do clinical work, but just clinical work doesn't tick the boxes for me. So I have to do other stuff. And I remember getting to a breaking point, and I scribbled in large letters across my diary, if not this, then what? Actually, I added a swear word in there, but I went. and that started the process of sitting down and going, okay, well, then what? What is it that I want? What am I missing? What's making me feel this dissatisfaction? And then how do I work towards it? Without necessarily, because I think a lot of people, they want to know the final destination. They want to know, well, I'm going to do exactly this. My dream job is this, and I can't find that, so now I'm just stuck. For me, it was very much, yours very much, that it's the squiggle again, to go, well, these sort of things are like, so let me give this a try and see what I learn from this experience, and where does that take me? Instead of saying, well, until I have the perfect next move, I'm not going to make any move.
Yeah, and that's the worst thing you can do. Like, any momentum is good momentum, right? And the other thing I think people underestimate, or they don't really think about, is how impactful it is to just be a good person. So if you're just a really good person and you ask smart questions and you're willing to learn new things and you treat people with respect and you show up and do the work that you say you're going to do, it will open doors for you in ways that no other degree or, master class is going to do for you. And I think just being curious, like for me, like I said, the one first intentional job move I made, it was like, I wanted to learn something new. I wanted to learn something I didn't know how to do. And I wanted to work for someone I thought I could learn from. Those were like my two biggest things. And I recognized I had a capability of translating business to science and science to business. And so that's what led me into that role in business development. But, someone took a chance on me because I had no business development experience. I'd never worked for a human medical school. Like this was, no one knew what to do with a deep. I met with over 100 people in the state of Michigan and bought a lot of cups of coffee as I tried to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And that curiosity and that just following up when someone made an introduction and being willing to, drive for that cup of coffee and all that stuff, it just ended up leading to these opportunities that I just couldn't have fathomed. But a big part of it now is I was just a nice person, and I said what I was going to do, and I did a good job. That goes a really long way, sadly.
I love that, because I think we do take it for granted that because of the situations and it's just going to sound arrogant for the profession, but we find ourselves surrounded by nice people who are intelligent and make smart decisions and are committed to doing what they say they're going to do. And if you have enough friends who do not work in our profession, you realize that is not the norm.
It's true. Yep. So all you got to do is educate other people on what it is a veterinarian brings to the table. And because there's just going to be a lot of people who just don't know. And that's okay. It's not a slam on veterinary medicine. It's just, can you explain what a civil engineer does effectively and how they could work in something outside of civil engineering, right? So you're just having to educate them. And so it's on you to say, how do I use words and phrases that are analogous to something they'd understand, And that takes your ability to look at yourself a little differently. But if you can do that and you can just say, I see how my experience in these, it doesn't even have to be just your profession. Maybe you're involved in volunteering or leading some other community group or something. Like all those experiences translate into how you could be an effective employee for somebody. But if you can translate those and then just go be a nice person, then it will go really far. I highly recommend the networking thing. I hate networking because I'm an introvert. Many of us are. But if you just keep reminding yourself, no one really likes it. But if you network with somebody, either virtually over LinkedIn or, some local community networking or something, and just ask somebody for a cup of coffee and then pick their brain, be able to articulate what it is you do and what you kind of think you're looking for, and then ask them for an introduction or two to someone else in their network they think would be interesting for you. And that's how I met those over 100 people. You'll grow that network in a way where what they're seeing is a really authentic, intelligent, curious professional. No one ever questioned my professionalism. No one questioned my intellect because I had a veterinary degree, So really what I was just trying to show them is who I am, and then be vulnerable and saying, I'm not sure what I want to do next, but I know I like business and I know I like science and I know I can actually kind of think both ways. So what is that, right? It's really, now I say all this like it's super easy to do, but this was, 20 years in the making for me. So, it's hindsight's 2020 for me, but I do talk to a lot of people who are interested in exploring, life outside of practice. And that's one of the fundamental skills. I just start there. Just start being curious and talking to people and stay nice.
Stay nice. Good advice. I have a fairly random question. I'm just curious. So how long ago did you leave practice? How many years ago was that?
I left private practice in 2006, okay. And then I went into lab animal medicine. Private practice.
So lots has changed. So you had a job that didn't offer you support, and there were practical reasons why it didn't work for you. And it sounds like you didn't really have many other options within clinical practice because of your non-compete and all of that. But the profession has come a long way since 2006 in terms of making it a more survivable profession. Do you think you could go back? Do you think clinical practice as it is today, I don't know how much contact you still have with clinical practice. I suppose you went into practices with Zomedica speaking to vets. Is it a more appealing proposition now? Do you think, I could have done this for sure?
Probably. But now that I've lived, there are parts of practice I truly miss. I mean, the animals, right? And I loved medicine. I loved the mystery of medicine and putting the puzzle together. I didn't love surgery, but I did love cosmetic surgery. I really like to challenge myself to close wounds and make them look as pretty as possible. But I think for me, now that I've experienced life outside of practice, I mean, one of the most like basic things to me is I like not relying on my profession or my work success to be reliant on a schedule. So seeing patients and knowing I have to be seeing patients between these hours in order to do my job, that would be hard for me to go back to, because after being out of it and knowing like, yeah, I'll still have meetings, I might be back to back to back, but I still have that opportunity to say, I'm going to take this meeting remotely because my daughter has a dentist appointment, right? I think that would be hard for me to give up.
It's autonomy. I feel that.
It is.
I feel that an autonomy in how and when I live my life is one of my gripes with clinical practice. I'm 5 hours into consulting. I know it's my consulting block, but I would kind of like to stop, but I can't because the roster says this is your consulting block.
Yeah, and that I think I've learned that autonomy, that's a good word for it. That autonomy piece is super important for me. But I think if I did think about going back to practice a little bit in the last couple of years, just like, okay, because I did it again, I left one job and what do I do now? I really love the growth of palliative and in-home senior care and euthanasia. My greatest experiences, my most memorable and meaningful experiences in practice were euthanasias. That I felt so blessed to be in those moments for people, the non-economic ones, I think I was good at it. And so the growth of those kind of specific specialty practices, I did think about if I went back to practice, that would be something I'd be interested in doing. But yeah, that autonomy piece is a tough one to get to break away from once you have it.
Yeah. All right. Big pivot. So let's go to the most recent couple of chapters of your career. So Zomedica, finding and making tech and selling it. Yeah, business. Starting and running a business.
Yeah.
Lessons from that. Have you got any big takeaways from that period?
Yes. Zomedica was a great example of you don't know what you're getting into. And so, it's good that you can't see down the road. I had no idea how much work that was going to be, but I had a lot of fun. I mean, that company, the cool thing about that company and co-founding that company was that I was kind of, my reason for being, other than just, I was COO and we started it. So I had to worry about like the daily operations of everything and just starting a company. But it was go find products that you would have used in practice. And that was my job. Cool. So that's where I got to see hundreds of products. And that's where I got to get really sensitive to how much bad stuff was out there. And it really let me kind of achieve my goal, which was I just wanted to bring something to market that I knew would impact the veterinary profession positively for generations to come. That was really cool. That's what I did. I went and found products that were being made for human medicine, but had potential in veterinary medicine, and saying, if you give us the rights to the veterinary license, then we will get a product on market for you and validate your product and start generating revenue for you before you get to the human market, right? And so that's what I was able to do.
And I'm just curious, and did you say earlier that's easier to do in vet compared to human med? So for a company like that, the plus for them would be, wow, there's an easy way for us to bring something to market, sell it, and test it, check that it works, basically.
Yeah. I mean, there's kind of like three divisions in medical, in biotech, if you will. There's pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and diagnostics. And every one of them has different regulatory considerations. In human medicine, you deal with the FDA. With veterinary medicine, you have the FDA, you have the USDA, and you have the EPA. And what product you're making is very dependent on which regulatory body you're working with, et cetera. So the hurdles for getting a pharmaceutical into the bovine species, let's say, that's going to be a really high hurdle, really high. Okay. The biggest reason for that is we consume
the end product,
cow products. So it's a human consideration, right? And then Diagnostics have a different level of consideration, whether they're being run at a central laboratory or whether they're in the point of care at a clinic. And then devices are interesting because medical devices, if it's considered a medical device, have no pre-market regulatory burden necessarily. So the bar is lower than human medicine in general, but it's not that things are totally wild, wild west in veterinary medicine. Okay. But if you bring a drug or a device or a diagnostic to the human sector, it's just going to cost exorbitantly more. And so for a company to say, well, we're going to take this product to human medicine, but we have this opportunity to take it into veterinary medicine earlier and generate revenue while we're going to human medicine, that's a really nice proposition, right? So that was kind of what I tried to do, is find technologies that I knew had a place in vet med, had fit the economics of veterinary medicine, and kind of make that pitch, if you will, to those companies to say, let us do this.
Okay. All right. And then how did we get from Zomedica to Vetlen, which is your current role?
Yeah. So in my time since I left Zomedica, I've been just consulting and advising startup companies.
In the vet space or everything?
Everything. Yeah. I've just had really cool opportunities to work with a lot of companies and advise founders. I did a lot of what I would call founder therapy, where it was just essentially helping them get through the challenges of being a startup founder. But I also kind of, because of that experience of working in the human biotech sector and then looking for products and bringing them into veterinary medicine, I kind of established a reputation in my network for someone who can see products that have potential in vet med. And so I was approached by someone in my network that said that who was advising a human company, and they had done a significant amount of preclinical work in sheep, and it was working really well. And that made them think maybe this has a place in veterinary medicine. So they approached me, and I'd say 9 out of 10 times when I have companies come and tell me they have a product for vet med, I'm like, no, you don't. It's just my opinion, but this one really caught my eye. I was like, yeah, this is really solving a problem that humans and human doctors and veterinary doctors have. The economics are something that veterinarians can afford, and they can provide an increased standard of care to their patients that they can afford and their customers can afford. And I really think it's on the right side of history for really creating a super valuable product that's going to change human and veterinary care.
So tell me if I understand the product correctly. So it's an antibiotic delivery device for surgery, right? Where if you have so it's a little sachet, little pocket, like a tea bag sort of a thing that you put at the side where you want your antibiotic, and then it's a slow release of an antibiotic at a specific site.
Correct. That's a very good way to put it. It's being developed in the human sector specifically for orthopedic infections and the treatment and breakdown of biofilms. So the inventor of this is out of the University of Utah Human Hospital in the Department of Orthopedics. And he's spent his entire career working on preventing and treating biofilm on orthopedic implants. So he invented this for that specific purpose. In veterinary medicine, I think it has a tremendous potential for local drug delivery. So wherever you need local drug delivered, then what this allows you to be able to do is you place the pouch in the incision in the wound, you exteriorize the catheter that's associated with the pouch, and then there's a needleless port on the end. So it allows you to replenish antibiotic or whatever therapeutic you're using on a daily basis for up to 30 days. And then when you want to remove it, you simply empty the pouch and pull it just like a drain. So the beauty of it, it's so simple, but I'm also working with a whole team of engineers to recognize it's not simple, but it's so beautifully engineered and the concept is so simple that it's really awesome that it's just giving us that opportunity to say, I'm going to get antibiotics directly to where they're needed without having to do systemic doses, where it's particularly in trauma and surgery, we know that the amount of systemic antibiotic that's getting to exactly where you need it to go is not enough, particularly to prevent biofilm development. So one, it's more efficacious, and two, it's just safer and more economical. So if you have an antibiotic, particularly if you have cultures that come back and it's multi-drug resistant and you have to use a drug that either potential has renal toxicity concerns or liver toxicity, and it's expensive. Now you can dose smaller amounts at the site of incision, and it reduces the economics associated with that.
Okay, so it's a dose dependent thing, because I looked at it first and went, oh, that's really clever. And then I thought, but hang on, it's still going to get absorbed systemically. So it's not like, it's systemically going to be exposed to, because I do the clinical podcast as well. And so many of the conversations from the different topics are coming back towards responsible antibiotic usage as well, reducing how much antibiotic you use and how long for, and figuring out that we completely overdo it. And then I thought, all right, but you still, because we give subcut injections and that does get absorbed systemically, and this device is going to sit sort of subcut or in a wound or something. So there will be systemic absorption, but is the point you can actually give a much smaller amount. So the amount that goes systemic is much reduced. Okay.
Yes, the amount is. So we are currently doing PK studies to show local tissue concentration as it relates to systemic concentrations, so that we can kind of dial in those dosing recommendations so that you can reliably do a smaller dose in the pouch. But regardless, even if you did a full day's dose of what you would have given systemically and you give that in the pouch, the data we have shows how much less is absorbed systemically versus being locally absorbed, and having its local impacts be, therefore leading it to be more efficacious. There's one thing I'm pretty tenacious about, is being evidence-based, because as we've said multiple times in this podcast, I don't want to be bringing things to the market that don't have a lot of evidence to support them. So we just started our first clinical trial on dogs. We're working on developing one for horses. And then we're doing PK studies for canine and equine markets to support those dosing recommendations.
Okay. So the MIC thing, I recently did another discussion on ears, otitis, and we were talking about, the dermatologist was talking about how taking culture results for ears doesn't really make that much sense, because they'll culture it and check the antibiotics on it based on what systemic levels, antibiotic levels will get into the ear. And she said that's not really valid, because when you put an eardrop in there, that concentration is so much higher that even the thing that comes up as resistant on your sheet that you get back from your culture results may still be killed at those higher concentrations. So this kind of fits with that. It's the same sort of principle as well.
Yeah,
okay.
Same principle. It's just, kind of back to our conversation about the amount of money it takes to do real clinical research, controlled studies and multi-site studies and all of that. It's incredibly expensive. And we're going to do those studies because it's the right thing to do. But it's why you don't see there's a lot of empirical use in vet med. We have to balance between that makes sense. If I put the drug in the ear, then the dose is going to be higher than the systemic dose, but I don't have any data to prove that. So do I err on the side of, let's just make sure we really wallop it and kill it? Or do I reduce my antibiotic usage because I probably don't need that much? And that's the thing that's so frustrating about antibiotic stewardship for veterinary medicine, is we're being tasked with this stewardship, but we're not being provided with solutions for how to do that more, how to take care of our patients more effectively, And so that's one reason that I was excited about this product, was just I felt like it was a solution. You're still using antibiotics, yes, but it was a solution to make the antibiotics you're using more effective, because they're getting to where they need to be, and they're going to work because they're where they need to be.
I'm trying to think. So I get the orthopedic thing, and especially the biofilm. I think I understand that's a big issue, but I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, so I go, well, boring. I don't get to use it. Other applications, the only thing I can think of is something like dog bites, where you have really dirty traumatic wounds. But are there other things that I'm not being imaginative enough to think of?
Yeah, I mean, so the initial market research we did was with orthopedic surgeons. So TPLO infections, fracture repair, anything where there is hardware in there and it's detrimental to the patient if the hardware becomes infected. That was kind of the original use case, because that's the use case in humans. But in talking to veterinarians, we've had a lot of people have interest in other things. So bite wounds being one, people want to know if it can be used for local pain relief. Can it be used for local chemotherapy delivery? Can it be used in the peritoneum? And again, this is the beauty of veterinary medicine, as people ask all these questions and think, oh, this is a really cool device. It would let me get the right treatment where I want it to go. And my answer back is, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But if you want to develop a study and try it, I'll get you product. So that's kind of the stage we're in right now in this company is, we're launching this summer. I'm getting pouches out to surgeons for what we're calling our beta trials. So it's getting pouches in the hands of surgeons to try it and look for new use cases. And then we also have a really cool resident award that will give $5,000 and free pouches to a resident who wants to try using the device for a new use case. And then, of course, we have clinical trials that we're going to continue to develop and conduct. But, the position we're in right now is how can we just let veterinarians think about other use cases for what a local sustained daily drug delivery option would give them.
Yeah, I'm thinking of body cavities. Could you put it in an abdomen or in a pleural space or something?
Yeah, we don't know. But from the engineering side of things, we can't see why not. Yeah. So from a clinical perspective, if someone wanted to try it, then they can absolutely try that. I balance between respecting the MacGyverism and saying I'm not selling anything unless I have data on it. So the data I'm collecting for you right now as a potential customer is going to be around antibiotic delivery in infected wounds or surgical sites. That's the data we have. We've also had data using lidocaine for local. It was actually infused with lidocaine to remove it. So we know that's the data we have. We've had multiple physicians or clinicians who are interested in local chemotherapy delivery. And I think there's an absolute potential for that use case. We have equine practitioners who have a lot of interests in wounds, tieback surgeries. These are all potential options. I just don't necessarily have data for them, but that's why I want to get pouches out there and get clinicians using them, because that generates data. And kind of back to what I was saying before is that there's an absolute need for the controlled clinical studies. Absolute need for them. We're doing those things. But there's also a need for evidence-based field research, because I want to know that I'm giving you the data that makes you think, it makes you, respect that, yep, we've done this in 200 sheep. It's working. It's safe, right? But I also want you to have the data from, Dr. Jones or Dr. Smith that who said, yeah, I tried it and it works, right? I'm trying to balance those two things because I'm just like you. I'm going to see a paper and I'm going to be like, the first thing I do when I read a paper or a study, I go to see who funded it.
Yeah. And what's the bias?
I always, is there bias? And I know I'm on the industry side, I'm going to pay someone to do some work for me. So, but that's important. That's how you get in journals, right? But I also want to have research where I'm like, I didn't pay this person anything. They just tried the pouch. They loved it. They gave me a testimonial, and go talk to them about it. I really want to be veterinarians creating products for veterinarians, being sold by veterinarians who just believe it works and they're telling everybody else they know about it.
Yeah. Where can people, I'll put stuff in the show notes and stuff, but where can people get in touch with you if you're listening to this and you go, I have an idea?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you just put our website in there, we have links in the website for one, we're giving away free pouches. So as soon as we launch, anyone who wants a free pouch gets one. We also have links in there to the resident award for anyone who's in academia or has residents that might be interested. And then you can put my email address in there too, if they're interested in being what I'm calling a beta user, or they have some clinical trial consideration that they want to talk about. They can email me directly.
That's really exciting. I'm looking at the clock. We should probably start wrapping up. Have I missed anything major? Anything else you want to talk about or feel very strongly about?
Yeah, I think I've hit all my my soapboxes.
As you get older, I find the boxes become more. I have a shelf of soapboxes.
I know. Yeah, I should just put boxes up here that just say soap.
I like that. All right. So our standard questions. The first one is, if you're a podcast listener, do you have any favorites that I should add to my playlist?
I am a podcast listener. I've really been getting into not all episodes, but Diary of a CEO.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen Bartlett. Yeah. And there's two characteristics of him that I really like. One is he's genuinely curious, and two, he's super vulnerable. And I didn't even start listening to it because I don't even like the title of the podcast. Like, you don't have to be a CEO or want to be a CEO to listen to it. But I just really appreciate those characteristics in him. And then when I really just want to like laugh, I listen to Smartless.
Smartless. I don't know that one.
It's Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett.
Ah, okay. Big names.
And they're like three best friends. And it's just like listening to three really horrible interviewers talk over guests and, make fun of each other, and very little intellectual capacity necessary to listen to it. But I've really grown to just enjoy their voices. It makes me happy.
Excellent. All right. The pass along question. I explained that one to you. So I get a question from a previous guest for my next guest without knowing who they're going to be. That's actually from Stephen Bartlett from the Diary of a CEO. I stole that question from him. So thank you for Stephen. Yeah. So my question, or your question from my previous guest, is, imagine your worst day that you had in veterinary science. And what is it that got you back, that got you through that day and got you back from that day?
Yeah. The worst day I had in vet med was the day I went back to practice after maternity leave for my first child. And I left her in a daycare, and she was 8 weeks old, and it was a very emotionally challenging day. And we already know I don't love surgery, and I had a foreign body removal. And it was just a really hard day. I was being challenged with something I already didn't really want to do, and it was my first day back, and then my mind was elsewhere, etc. And the dog ended up dehissing and dying within a week. Oof. His name was Elvis. And how did I get over it? I don't know if I ever did. But what got me back on the horse and made me come back into practice was honestly necessity. I had a job to do. I had a child to raise. I needed food on the table. And that's not really a healthy reason to get back into it, but it goes back to a lot of our conversation around perfectionism and everything else. And I'm sure that had an impact on me when I had to leave practice. So, but yeah, that was my roughest day. I think of that. I think of the dog a lot. I think of the owners a lot. The gentleman who owned the practice, protected me. They were very angry at me, but he defended me. He's like, it could have happened to anyone. I don't know if that was true. No, at the time, I didn't
totally
believe
can. It. I've been there. I think we've all been there. All have those stories. Oh, that's such a vulnerable period for that to happen as well. That first time you have to take your first kid back, and it's such a common thing. That's not just for our profession, obviously for everybody, but I have a kid, and it's that very special time, and then you go, all right, now I'm going to kick you out so I can go back to work.
Yeah. And I think that's probably why it was a doubly hard day. But as with everything, you look back and, now that daughter is going to be 19 in a few months, and I'm helping her through those same difficult days and just saying, you got to get through it. You're going to learn from it. You're going to, it's not going to hurt so much in the future. And I think that is probably one of the very few days in my life where I don't think I'll ever totally get over it.
And that is the reality. I always, when I have these conversations, I'm looking for the solution of how could you have done it better? What can we learn from it? But the reality is sometimes but life just sucks. And you just have to do it. previous guest said, going into vet, you have to understand that it's a blood sport. And that is it. Sometimes it's a blood sport. Some days are just going to suck. And you have to just get up.
Yeah, and I have friends who are human physicians who have had similar experiences. They've lost people that they didn't expect to lose. So that's part of medicine. But again, we're trained that like, here, you did this right, check. You did this right, check. You did this right, check. Get your A, get your A, get your A. And then you have a failure like that results in such tremendous loss. And to find that inner strength to say, it's okay. Like these things are going to happen and you have to come back from them. Yeah, that was not a day to be able to talk to myself that way. That day was particularly challenging. So yeah, but I guess it's kind of a downer way to answer that question, but it's true.
But it's relevant. It's super, super relevant. I think that I'll add to that maybe something to consider in a situation, although it's very hard to be rational during situations like that. But when that happened in that week, on the day that Elvis died, it would have felt like the end of the world to you. Like it would have been the biggest, most important, catastrophic thing in that moment. And now it's, a long time later and life carried on. And nobody killed you and nobody took your vet degree from you. And you carried on and built an amazing life in Korea. And it doesn't, it feels like the worst possible thing. And it sucks at the time, but it does, you're not over it, but you carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to think that I'm, go back what I said in the beginning, that mistakes are really just learning opportunities. I don't know if I made a mistake on that animal. I have no idea. But because I think of him often and I'm still in the world of trying to make the world better for animals, I'm just doing it in a different way, because I didn't just lose him and forgot and moved on and didn't think about it. He's still there making an impact, helping me make the next right decision. Sometimes you got to embrace the pain because it's what makes you who you are. And that I think is a very common theme in veterinarians, back to what we talked about.
Righto. Oh, no, wait, I almost forgot your question for my next guest.
Okay. My question is going to be the opposite of that. I want to know, what was that day in your professional career, assuming this is a veterinarian, what was that day that you are most proud of, that you're just like, that was a good day. They all need to be that way.
Oh, great. I just can't wait to hear the answer to that one. All right, the very last question. You have an opportunity to speak to the new grads of 2024 at the end of this year. You're at a talk or something, or you're on a podcast, and you have a couple of minutes to give them one little bit of advice for life or vet career or whatever you prefer.
Be easy on yourself. Just be easy on yourself. It's so important to everyone you love and all the patients you want to care for that you are good to yourself. You will be a better veterinarian and a better everything in your life if you learn to just love yourself and talk nicely to yourself, believe in yourself, accept mistakes when you make them, learn from them and move on, because it's inevitable. That's just life. But if you let those things defeat you, if you are your own worst critic and your own worst enemy, you will ultimately not be the veterinarian that you got into this profession to be.
Stephanie, that was amazing. Thank you so much for the time and the vulnerability and leading by example. I really appreciate your time.
No, I thank you for having me. This was very enjoyable.
Before you disappear, I wanted to tell you about our new weekly newsletter. I speak to so many interesting people and learn so many new things while making the podcast. So I thought I'd create a little summary each week of the stuff that stood out for me. We call it the Vet Vault 321, and it consists of, firstly, 3 clinical pearls. These are 3 things that I've taken away from the clinical podcast episodes. My light bulb moments, the penny dropping, any new facts, and the stuff that we need to know to make all the other pieces fit.
Then, 2 other things. These could be quotes, links, movies, books, a podcast highlight, anything that I've come across outside of clinical vetting that I think you might find interesting. And then 1 thing to think about. I'll share something that I'm pondering, usually based on something that I've read or heard, but sometimes it'll be just my own musings or rants. The goal of this format is that you can spend just 2 to 3 minutes on the clinical stuff and move right along if that's all that you're after. But if you're looking for content that is more nourishing than cat videos or doom scrolling, then our 2 other things should send you in the right direction. And then something extra for when you feel like a slightly longer read. If you'd like to get these in your inbox each week, then subscribe by following the newsletter link in the show description wherever you're listening to this. It's free, I think it's useful, it's fun, and it's easy to unsubscribe if it's not for you. Okay, we'll see you next time.